Welcome back, kids, to another episode of Sit Crooked, Talk Straight, a space where we do not pull punches. We get comfy. We are authentic, but we are also talking about real life, real stuff, real women looking for real change. My name is Katie Myers.
I'm Leanne Jamison.
And
I'm a mess. I'm a mess today. We're
we
here for
are
it. Okay.
We are so thrilled to be with you. We're talking about this morning, and per usual, we just kind of shoot the shit and see what comes up. And I asked Leanne, like, we haven't done an episode about like relationships in a really long time, and kind of are along the lines of like relationship with others. But anytime we talk about relationship with others, you must start with the relationship that you have with self. And so I'm excited to talk about and kind of explore. And I will go ahead and say we don't know that we have answers, but I do
We
think
do. I'm sure we do.
I'm sure there will be some nuggets in here somewhere. There's just a lot of questions, and I hope that these are questions that maybe you can ask yourself, or if you are not in a therapeutic relationship, you can seek out a therapist or a coach or someone to help you sort through some of this, because this is kind of big life stuff, right? Like relationships, it's big.
Yeah, it's pretty big. It's pretty big. It's a big topic, when we think about the loneliness factor and all of the work that we do. First, just looking at like, why is it important to start with self, and diving into that. But really looking at the topic of, is this self-love sabotage, and how, when does self-love actually turn into self-sabotage within relationships? When do we use it as a shield? When do we use it as like, no, I'm just going to keep on working on myself, and I'm because of our fears, right,
Right.
of entering into the relationship. So those are some of the questions that we're going to tackle, but really looking at like, again, I know that I feel like this is a real key topic in term of just like the loneliness factor. And I think it was Gretchen Rubin that maybe I might be quoting that author. I don't know if it's the right author, but wrote the loneliness factor. And with that, it's how we're so connected, first of all. And I'm going to go off topic a little bit. We're so connected when you think about social media and all the resources we have, and every way that we have to connect with each other. But then we have the highest rate of loneliness, depression, anxiety, right? And so that brings to the topic of just, so many, I'm just going to speak to women because that's who I work with. So many women are really getting the call to step forward and work internally, right? Work on healing those wounds, work on healing some low self-esteem and confidence issues, and just, all the past hurts, to the point where we're creating this deep sense of self-love and compassion. And when does that then shift into this sort of like deterrent, or what do I want to say, deflection of, what they truly want? And this is like, if you truly do, if one of your goals for your life is to find a partner, and that's not everybody's
Right.
goal, right? And
Right.
I think that's really important to identify. And right, if that is your goal, having that as like an intention for your life to find, to be in community, and you even talked about, and I know this to be true, is that we are wired for connection, we are wired for community. And that can look different in different like people's lives, right? The community, I think about many of my friends who are in their 40s, who are not in a committed relationship, and they're like, you guys are my community and my people, and the people that I want to connect with and enrich my life, right? And so it's not this traditional, I guess, sense of community that we would think of before, of just like, it has to be a family, and you have to be married, and you have to be this, and you have to be that. So that's sort of my spiel.
I love that. I love
Kick it
that. And
off.
it makes me think of like, no, that's so perfect. And it connects with something that I was talking with a friend with this morning. Um, a new friend of mine, we are lifting weights in the morning, and she's very new to me. And so like I'm just learning a lot, and like we're, just feeling each other out with different things with like our sense of humor and like how candid we can be. And but she talked about the traditional. It's really funny that you said that because she actually used the words like traditional family this morning.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and so she and a friend went to go visit a friend of hers. Anyway, it was a lesbian couple and their child and their daughter. And the friend that went with my friend was like, it was really good for me to see that expression of family. And so we got to talking about it, and I was like, is it like just because she's never seen how like, and I think she used the words like how normal and healthy
Mm,
a family could be, but there was the caveat of a lesbian family. Like there was right, like there was this kind of background um, chatter of, and there's a whole lot that goes to this that I don't have time to go into that explains some of this, but the crux of it was when we have a definition of what we think is family, or when we add the word traditional, or when we add all the societal and cultural, like quote unquote, norms and expectations and all the things, we limit ourselves, I think,
hmm
to these like frameworks that don't allow us to see just how rich and fulfilling so many different types of connection can be, whether it's blood, right? Like there's a connection purely because you are related to somebody and you have similar DNA, genetics, blood. Then there's the chosen family, right? The people like your tribe, people that you would absolutely would choose and continue to choose, but they're not necessarily um, um, the the traditional, like whatever that definition is. Anyway, I'm challenging the idea of like what traditional looks like while wanting to be sure that we're not running from certain things because like you said, like the shield that it can provide us when we're saying like, oh, I'm just in this season of like self-love and self-care, that also could be code for I'm avoiding the fuck out of vulnerability because I don't want to get hurt or I'm not ready to whatever. um
Right, right.
so
I'm
it's
not ready to be vulnerable to that extent with somebody else. So, and it can very much like camouflage as because we know, I mean, again, as therapists, right? Social worker, therapists, we know and we preach how important it is to start with self. Everything comes from within, right? Our reality is created from within, our relationships are created from within, our everything, right? Our abundance, our everything. The reality that we see in front of us starts from within. With our inner landscape and our, narratives that are going on constantly.
right.
So when we dive into it, it is starting with self. But at what point does it go into that tipping point, right?
Right.
Of okay, I'm a really like I don't, it's almost like the oh my gosh, it's almost like the hyper independent, right? Like, I
Right.
don't need anybody else to take care of me and this and that, but it comes from a wounded space, right? It comes from a space of survival and protection, right?
Protection. Yes, that was the word that was coming. Like just this like protective. I mean, and shield is like perfect too. Of like it just creates this barrier that protects us from potentially getting hurt. And I think like even when
Mm-hmm.
I heard you say, because I do think, I guess there's an internal part of me that either wants to challenge or I'm challenged by it, of the thought that not everybody wants to be in relationship. Um, and I think there are absolutely times, like phases and periods of time that we are not focused on, like a relationship is not my main priority. And I should say romantic relationship is not my main priority. But I would argue that being in relationship, being in connection with others is such a human need. It feels so like fundamental. Like I need oxygen, I need food, I need
Mm-hmm.
water, I need shelter, I need friends, I need relationship, I need
Community. Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
And so I guess like the question that I would pose to listeners, and again, if you have a knee jerk reaction to what we're saying in any direction, I encourage you to step back and dig into like, what is that knee jerk reaction? Like, why are you having
Hmm.
that um, emotional reactivity to, um, well, I have to take care of myself, because if I don't take care of myself, then I won't be able to be with anybody. But again, is that a mask versus what happens? And I've seen it a million times and I've experienced it myself. When you get into new relationship, there's almost like a part of your brain that gets shut off where you forget parts of yourself because you are so invested in learning about or being with or connecting with others, especially romantic relationships. And so, like, what is the balance? And is your place on the spectrum, on the continuum of relationship healthy? Is it, I hate to use the word normal. Does it work for you in comparison to what somebody else is maybe potentially displaying in their relationships and their level of vulnerability? What works for you may not work for someone else. What works for someone else, again, what looks ideal and so appealing, do we even know what it is that we want? Are we even clear about, because I think that's another form of self-sabotage. We we think we know what we want. You used the words before we started recording of like not settling. We think we know, but again, is that fuel for distance?
Right. Right.
I mean,
And,
again, I don't have any answers. I mean,
well, I think it's important to recognize of just like the self-awareness portion of it, right? Before we can, do anything, it is about self-reflection. It's about getting curious with yourself and just asking those questions. So it's looking at, I want to give like five, right? I want you guys to walk away with five questions just to ask yourself. When again, this is about when you are um, you know, in your deepest desires, you're just like, I do want to be in an intimate relationship, a partnership with somebody. And you are sort of teetering back and forth in this space of just, yeah, like I've spoken to so many people that are like, yeah, I get on the dating apps and then I like back off. Maybe that's not for me, right? It's really, when you're trying to dive into like what's authentic, right? And what's conditioned, what is fear, what is, excitement, or, that moving forward even in the face of fear because it is authentic to you of like, God, I'm so afraid to be vulnerable. And I really do desire to have this life, this partnership with somebody else. So just, a couple of questions to walk away with is like, am I prioritizing? This is a good one. Am I prioritizing self care to avoid emotional risks? Right?
mm,
Am I
mhm.
doing this? Am I filling all of the spaces in my life, right? And we can think of them as very enriching because they're often things that we love to do, right? I'm going to go, I'll go to the movies with my friends, or I'll go to this, I love like art, like fairs and stuff like that, and festivals, and or hiking, or whatever it is, right? Life is abundant and it's really, really cool. Am I filling all the spaces so that I don't have the space to even, look at like the emotional risks? Is my focus on self-care in a way to nurture myself or to build walls to protect myself from rejection, right? That would
And
be the first question.
another layer to that, or level of that, is because all the things that you just said are so spot on, especially with like the activities. No one would argue that that's unhealthy, like going and doing
Right.
yoga and going to the gym and going and like a spa day and going, like, no one would argue and be like, oh, that's not, like, can you like rethink your like priorities?
I
And like,
know, it's so funny to be like,
but I was thinking about this, and I don't even know why this popped in my head, but the thought of like, okay, I can't go out, I can't do late night activities because I have a 5 a.m. yoga class. And so I don't date, and this, I'm not talking about me, but like I don't date because my yoga, it'll interfere with my yoga class. And it's like the rigidity is what kind of speaks to me of like when we're so rigid about
Hmm.
no, my self-care has to look this way. And I'm not saying that we need to give up things. I do think we need to be introspective and thoughtful about, is a certain pattern of behavior keeping you from experiencing a whole nother like aspect of life. Um,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. Oh, I love that you brought in that like rigidity in that specific example. Because it is, it's not just, you're so spot on of just like when I challenge somebody that's like, well, I'm going to yoga and I'm doing this and I'm having fun with my friends and I have this on like, this night and like whatever. Because life is great and abundant and, right? It's just like, are you flexible and adaptable enough to be able to integrate other things into? I love it.
because that relationship requires that anyway, right? Like that's all like,
Right.
so yeah, like
Yeah. Yep.
opening your eyes to that
Absolutely.
before the relationship will help you in the relationship. Um,
Well, even just like explore relationships, right? Instead of avoiding them.
yeah, yeah.
So that's the first one. Am I prioritizing self care to avoid emotional risks? The second question that I want you to ask yourself is, do I fear letting others see like this less like polished side of me, right? Like, am I like trying to grasp onto perfectionism? Do I feel like I need to have all my shit together, right, in order to be available to other people, right? Am I striving for perfection under this guise of self-love, avoiding situations where my imperfections and my insecurities or my emotional depths might be exposed? So again, it's that vulnerability aspect that we're looking at, right? Like, am I doing this? Am I just keep on? Because there is such a thing as, how do I want to say this? Oh my gosh, I'm trying to be like so careful with it. As just like getting caught in the cycle of healing, okay? Like constantly being in this cycle where shit's getting kicked up and you're like, oh nope, I gotta stop my life, I gotta work on this, I gotta stop, instead of doing both, right? Like shit's gonna come up and I'm moving forward anyway, right? And like that's life. So we can totally get caught in this like just healing pattern, and self-love pattern in order to avoid, right? It's like, well, nope, there's another thing, obviously I'm not fucking ready.
I asked a client recently, single male, 50s. I said, what are you looking for in relationship? And he said, and I just like it seared in my mind. He said, an imperfect person who is self-aware and willing to look at all the parts. And I remember thinking, like, okay, like we're not looking for, and most people aren't looking for perfection in a partner. One, because hello, that doesn't exist. We're not perfect.
Right.
No one is perfect. But also that like that level of like, yes, I can own like I've got faults. I've got quirks, I've got hangups, I've got some baggage that I carry with me, but I'm aware of it. I am not hiding from it or pretending like it doesn't exist or letting it show up in ways that hurt people, but not doing my own work. And so it's like the
Mm.
imperfection, but being self aware. And that does require a certain level of honesty with yourself
Yeah.
and with others, where you can show up to a relationship and say, yeah, okay, that triggered me. Um, I I did not use my words. I did not pause. I should have taken a time out. Right, because that's the self-awareness. So yeah, I love that, like not hiding behind this, like, oh, well, I'm just not ready for a relationship because why? Because you're not perfect? Okay, great. Like, that's not the point of
Join the
relationship.
fucking club.
Yeah.
Join the club. Yeah, and I get, yeah, yes. I'm gonna leave it at that. I am going to leave it at that because it's Yeah, I just see that. I see that so much of just like I gotta stop. And that's what, even in my programs and even in the business builders program that I have of just like when you're building your holistic business, we have this mantra that says done is better than perfect, right? Like we are moving forward. And what that means to us is like we are moving forward without the perfectionism because it's never going to be perfect. And it's an always evolving experience and expansion, just like we are as human living beings.
Absolutely. 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 Like, yeah,
So,
the evolution, the growth. We don't get from point A to point B um in a millisecond. Like there's a journey. And really
right.
like the beauty is in the journey, not even the destination. So and people do not relate to perfection. So if you're walking around with your perfect self and trying to achieve perfection, that is the perfect way to repel people from you because ain't nobody can relate to that shit. I relate to the
Yes.
messy and like the ugly and the like the weird and the like quirk. Like tell me the things that you struggle with so that I could be like, oh my gosh, girl, me too. Oh my gosh, like same. Oh my gosh, I totally fucked up in that way too. Because that is where like the connection allows us to go that level deeper. Otherwise, it's all just superficial.
Right, exactly. Well, it's a vulnerability and just like connecting through emotions too, of just like, yep, yep, been there, feel that. I totally see you. I see you and I feel you. And yeah, if we're hiding all of that, there's a wall. There's a wall. So the third question is, am I keeping people at arm's length by claiming I need more time for myself, right? So is your time for self-reflection and self-care harmonized? Is it balanced, right? It goes back to this like the prioritizing self-care to avoid emotional risk. This sort of like falls into it. But it's just again, it's no, I need this time. I need some time to recoup, or are you isolating, right? I feel like we don't really have to go deep into that because I felt like that one is like more aligned with the first one that we asked too.
Well, it's another. I think it's another layer, another way of saying, are you using um, certain activities as an excuse to
Right.
isolate? And if there's, and I just think isolation, even in this world of like overly connected through social media, we're overly connected in some ways, but we're the loneliest we've ever been, and so like that isolation um, can really fuck us up, and like
Right.
sometimes tell us that we're not worthy of relationship. And so when we stay in that space, we have that narrative potentially, not always, but potentially. So yeah, I like that. It's like another layer of the first one.
Right. Right. Well, and being able to really look at like we get so in our heads when we start doing this, right? When we just like, well, no. And again, it can start off. It's just like such a like fine line. Like I said, it's like this tipping point where you're just like, no, I really do need time for myself. Like I know for me too, being an extrovert, I am very, very extroverted and I do need some just like down, like a lot of downtime sometimes to just sort of recoup and just like be and be like
Yes,
turned off a little bit. Like, does that make sense? Like, so, but
totally.
then I know that I can like slowly move into this space where I just keep on avoiding and keep on ignoring calls or keep on like just like if I get into scrolling or watching, movies over, whatever, I'm like, okay, all right. Like, did you get up today? Did you take a shower today?
If you get out of your jammies, no judgment. If you didn't get out of your jammies,
No
no judgment. But
judgment.
that might be a
That's just
question to
my
ask yourself,
gauge.
right? Like
Yeah,
that might
that's
be a
my
question.
gauge.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I like
So, and even with my husband, right? I'm just like avoiding. It's so interesting how I can do that even with my husband home, where it's just like I'll just be up in the room, he'll be down in like the living room, and I feel that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I am totally just like isolating. So like intentionally going down there, making eye contact, and like
yes.
because I realized that my self-care totally tipped over and I feel it, and it's important for you to know that line for yourself too, So I know that I feel it within my body, and I hear it in my head when it's just sort of just like running rampant.
Yeah.
So, and then this is something I feel like we touched on a little bit, but like that hyper independence. So the fourth question is, do I use self care as a way to validate my independence at the cost of connection? So is it that like overly focused of being independent? I don't need anybody, I don't need anybody else because of past experiences, right? Of being hurt. Go. You
I
just got really excited.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I just read something recently about how hyperindependence is a sign and symptom of trauma. And trauma typically, not always, but trauma typically happens within relationship. When we are wounded in relationship, that is where we find our healing is in relationship. And so when there's any type of like, I'm, I, I totally fall into this category of hyper independence. I will be struggling. I will have 47 grocery bags, and my husband will say, "Hey, do you need any help?" And I'm like, "No, like I've got this. I've got one because one, I really do think I can. Two, I don't like when people help me. Like I like to do things on my own. It makes me feel good to like achieve things on my own. And three, if I'm honest, there's a little bit of martyr and victim mentality that goes along with that of like, I do it all by myself. I don't need anybody. You can't help me. This is what I like. This is all about me, which is really selfish. One, but the
Mm-hmm.
wounding, the trauma, the wounds that happen within a relationship, the healing has to happen in relationship. We don't, and so like, yeah, if you are like hyper independent, and I'm all about like, I am woman, hear me roar. I am all about like, um, I don't, frankly, I don't need, and this is part of my hyper independence coming out. I don't need a lot of help. I can put together furniture. I can hang shelves on, like I can change a tire on the side of a road. I can do a whole fucking lot of things that I do not need anybody's help with. And I'll be damned. That shit doesn't totally create some space and separation between me and others because I am pushing them away saying, nope, got it. I got it.
Yep.
When it's kind of like, what? Fuck, you don't have to fucking do it all. You don't.
Right. You're not meant to. It's okay. And yeah. Oh my gosh. So much. So much. It's so funny because I feel like I went from one extreme to the other like, I just like go back and forth because it was all about hyper independence. And then it was just like, oh no, I can't. Oh, I can't do anything. Like, I just don't, because I didn't want to express, like, I don't fucking want to do it. Yes, I can change my oil. Yes, I can change my tires. Yes, I can do all of these things. I don't fucking want to,
I know.
though.
I know. I'm tired. And sometimes you just get tired and you're just like, all right, can someone else please?
Right?
I'm still in
So,
my
but
jammies from the last question. I'm still in my jammies. Can someone else come do it for me? I get it.
I
No,
think
but
it is from
self-reflection,
that
be
hyper
aware.
independence, though, too, because like that's how I grew up, and like women do it all, and it was like such a conditioned part. Um, so it comes to a point where it's just like I'm tired, I don't want to do it, but then I didn't have the words to be because I felt like I was weak if I didn't do it, and it's all of this fun shit that just happens in your head.
So fun. So fun. Go to therapy. So fun.
I know. Right. And then the final question for you to ask yourself if your self love has become self sabotage is, when I think about being vulnerable, do I convince myself it's unnecessary because I'm enough on my own? And really looking at like self love is essential. That's not what we're saying, right? I want you to be really, really clear. Self love is where we start, but how it can get in the way. You know, does your belief in being enough prevent you from opening up and inviting others to support you and love you in return, right? And that, yeah, go ahead.
Is, is self-sufficiency, is self-sufficiency robbing you of, what would the word be? Connection. I mean, it, again, fine line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What matters is what's going on inside. You and I can show up and be and act the exact same. independent, we're strong, we're smart, we're capable, we're in the solution, like we get shit done, like we're ambitious. But if I'm coming at that from a place of I have to be self-sufficient because I don't trust and I'm not willing to let anybody else come in, and you're coming at it from a place of no, like I'm whole and this is part of who I am. It's not the only thing about me, but it's part of who I am. It might look the same on the outside, but what's going on internally is what makes it so very different. And so doing that, like, again, self-check, like checking with yourself, is being self-sufficient kind of like the last one, that self-independence, like the over hyper independent. But you don't have to do it all. You don't have to be.
Right.
And the vulnerability that allows us to connect with one another is we are not sufficient. I'm going to go out and say, like, I am not sufficient in, how do I want to say it? It's not coming out right. Well, I need vulnerability from myself and from others. I don't have like a reserve of that I can pull from. I have to experience that. And so,
Yes.
yes. Okay. That was painful.
Yes.
That was painful trying to get that out.
No, well, when you think about it, vulnerability is imperative. It really, like, okay, so we can have all these mindset shifts. We can have all of the, the self-love and the self-awareness and this, but if we're not going to action our way, which is the vulnerability, then we're going to stay stuck, right? Like
Yes.
having the experience, right, of just moving into this space is imperative. So yes, these are questions to ask yourself, and then what are you going to do about it? Or, like, how do you want to move forward now that you have these this internal reference, this awareness? How are you going to be vulnerable with yourself? How are you going to be vulnerable with others? Because that is truly what we're looking at here. There's this fear of rejection that holds us up. I mean, like, that's really underlying these past traumas, the past hurts, the in relationship. And you said it so beautifully, of just like vulnerability and being in relationship is actually what heals these wounds. And we have to action into that. We have to be vulnerable. We have to put ourselves in spaces where we are vulnerable. And
And
that is,
uncomfortable,
that
and
can,
maybe uncomfortable, right? Like
yes,
it's
yes.
okay to be uncomfortable. I promise people all the time, you will not die or catch fire if you are vulnerable and you experience discomfort because of it. You're not going to die or catch fire, promise. And so, like, worst case
Yes,
scenarios,
absolutely.
like, you're going to be okay. It might be uncomfortable. Okay. Be
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
I mean, again, like you always say, it's just like there's going to be discomfort, right? I'm uncomfortable staying where I'm at. I'm comfortable, moving into this new space, or being vulnerable. But like, you choose which discomfort you want, right? Every single day we have that choice, right? And it is. I wanted to post this. So when at the gym, there's on the mats where we do like our HIIT classes and stuff like that, and lifting classes, there are markers where everybody stands because it's sort of it's a small space. Anyways, but the markers are quotes from like the coaches and stuff like that. So I love it. And I took a picture of this one because it really resonated with me and with a lot of the women that I work with. And it says, this is from Coach Taylor at Rise Fitness in Hamburg, New York. It's okay to be nervous. You've never been this version of you before, right? Um, that's why I love my gym. Another reason why I love it. My fitness center. So it's, yes, we are like, this is a different version of ourselves, being vulnerable while being self-aware, while like having this deep sense of self-love and compassion for ourselves, and then like, being vulnerable with others with that. It's okay to be nervous. It's going to be uncomfortable. And this is truly where the growth happens, right? And this is where the healing happens, is by doing and actioning. It's not about sitting in the shit. It's about recognizing the shit and moving forward with it. So
Oh,
I love it.
what a great way to close out. Like, that's so perfect to encapsulates everything. but go to therapy, y'all. Like trying to figure all this shit out on your own is a real mind
It's
fuck. And you need someone to guide you and bounce things off of, and like to get a sounding board. And yeah, just go to therapy, get a life coach. Just do it.
just do it. Yes. Yeah. Neither of us ended up where we are without the support. I always, I always say I'm like, I have a complete team. I have my Reiki. I have my energy healer. I have my energy psychotherapist. I have my spiritual mentor. I have my coach,
It,
my business coach.
it takes a village. Takes a village.
Oh my gosh. So yes, and it takes a village to move forward, right? It really does. So we are meant to be in connection. Those are just, again, just a couple little things to think about and ponder on. A couple few things to see if, like, again, it's, we've been on this path towards like really looking at putting on your oxygen mask before like anybody else's, and self-love, and because we've swung so far the one way, right? So then swinging so far the other way of being that hyper independent and like busting through all of these societal expectations or narratives to create our own reality. And we want to create a reality that truly is authentic to us. So if it is that desire that you want to connect but you're keeping yourself from connecting, that's going to create more suffering, and that is not what we want here in the world. There's already enough of that. So let us know if you have any questions, if you need any recommendations or any kind of support. We're here for you and cheering you on. So until next time, we want to thank you, thank you, thank you. We are so honored that you listen, that you show up wildly for yourself, and that you keep on living your deepest desires out. So until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, let your light and your legacy shine. We are here for it. So, mwah.